My ex used me for money while pretending to build a future together and cheated when I needed support, so I cut ties entirely and her regret arrived too late to matter. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for most of my relationship, I believed love meant stepping up, no questions asked, whenever someone you cared about was struggling. I met her when she was barely scraping by, student loans piling up, a job that barely covered rent, and bills that seemed to double every month. From the first date, I remember thinking, she's smart, driven. I can help her get there. And that's exactly what I did. I covered rent, groceries, utilities, even emergency expenses that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. At first, it felt natural, almost honorable. I'd see her eyes light up when I'd hand over another paycheck, or hear her say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I swallowed her gratitude like it was air, letting it fuel the part of me that wanted to be the dependable one, the rock. Friends noticed, of course. "You're doing too much, man," they'd joke, shaking their heads. And I'd laugh it off, thinking they didn't understand. They couldn't see that to me, this wasn't too much. This was love. This was building a life together. She framed it perfectly, always saying, "We're investing in our future, one step at a time." Every time she said it, I'd nod, smile, and push aside the exhaustion clawing at the edges of my mind. Evenings blurred into nights of overtime, answering her calls while juggling my own responsibilities. I'd make dinner, fold laundry, balance bills, all while she poured her energy into her career goals and social outings. And I believed it was teamwork. I told myself that sacrifice now meant stability later, that my patience and dedication would be recognized, appreciated, rewarded. But somewhere deep down, a small, nagging thought lingered: what if this generosity isn't seen as love at all? What if it becomes something else, something she expects, not appreciates? I shoved it aside, telling myself I was overthinking. Yet, every time she smiled and said, "We're building a future," a tiny part of me wondered if one day, I'd realize I'd been building something, for her alone. It started with little things I brushed off at the time. Random charges on her card she'd laugh off, vague explanations about bills I didn't understand, promises to pay me back next week that never came. I remember one night sitting on the couch, staring at our shared budget spreadsheet, and asking, "Hey, why does this add up differently?" She gave me that tired smile, the one that said, "Don't worry, it's nothing," and I swallowed the lump in my throat. At first, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. After all, wasn't love about trust, about giving someone the benefit of the doubt? But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was subtle at first, a hesitation in her voice, a quick change of topic whenever money came up. I caught her laughing at messages on her phone she'd hide when I walked into the room. I didn't confront it right away. I wanted to be the good guy, the one who didn't jump to conclusions, the rock she could rely on. I told myself, maybe I'm being paranoid, maybe it's stress, maybe it's just life getting messy. Friends started noticing too. "Dude, something feels off," they'd say, giving me that look like they were seeing what I refused to admit. I'd nod and smile, but inside, a tiny seed of doubt was planted. I'd see her posting pictures out with friends while claiming she was working late, or hear stories about spontaneous trips she took for work that sounded too extravagant. I convinced myself I was the responsible one, the one who had to hold everything together, even if it hurt. And then came the nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my sacrifices meant anything at all. If building a future together wasn't a promise but a story she told to keep me paying, keep me providing, keep me blind. It was the first time I realized that love, the way I understood it, might not be mutual at all. I should have seen the pattern, the cracks in the picture-perfect facade, but I didn't. And I wouldn't fully understand how deep the deception ran, not yet. By this point, I started feeling the weight of the imbalance more acutely. It wasn't just the money, it was everything. I'd cover rent, groceries, and bills while she focused on her career, friends, and social life. I remember one Friday night, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, I suggested we cook together, and she sighed, scrolling through her phone. Can't tonight, babe, I have deadlines, she said without looking up. That casual dismissal hit harder than I expected. I realized I was expected to provide while her energy went elsewhere, and somehow, I felt guilty for noticing it. I tried to talk to her once, sitting across the small kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. I feel like I'm carrying more than my share, and I'm starting to burn out, I said, carefully, trying not to sound accusatory. She leaned back, crossing her arms, eyes narrowing slightly. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm doing my best, she said. Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried an edge that stung. Every word she spoke seemed to shift responsibility back onto me, like my exhaustion was a personal flaw instead of a warning signal. Even in small moments, the dynamic was clear. I'd plan a night out together, and she'd cancel last minute for friends or work. I'd cover an unexpected expense, and she'd shrug as if it were normal, routine, expected. The smile that used to feel like appreciation now started to feel like entitlement. I loved her, yes, but I started questioning whether she loved me back, or if she merely tolerated me as a provider. Sleep became fitful, nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was what love always felt like. My friend's warnings echoed in my mind, you're being used. Step back. But I told myself, no, this is normal. She's stressed. We're building a future together. The phrase replayed like a mantra, keeping me in place even as the gnawing sense of imbalance grew. And yet, somewhere underneath the routine, I sensed something bigger was brewing, something I wasn't ready to face, something that could undo everything I thought we had. I remember the day clearly, though I wish I could erase it from memory. I was sorting through some bills, trying to make sense of our finances, when I noticed a charge, one I didn't recognize. I asked her casually that evening, thinking it was just an oversight. Oh, that? It's nothing, just a little treat for myself, she said, smiling, but there was a tightness in her voice that made me pause. I should have pushed harder. I didn't. I wanted to trust her, wanted to believe in the narrative we'd built together, that I was the provider, she was the dreamer, and together we were unstoppable. But the next few days, I started noticing patterns. Random withdrawals, receipts she'd forgotten, trips she couldn't fully explain. Each one alone seemed minor, but together they painted a troubling picture. I tried to reason with myself, maybe it's just stress, maybe it's nothing serious. I confronted her gently one night, sitting in the dim glow of the living room lamp, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Can we talk about these charges? I asked. She shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away. I told you, it's nothing. Stop overthinking, she said, her voice sharper this time, a defensive edge that sent a cold spike of doubt straight through me. I felt the first real pang of betrayal that wasn't just financial, it was emotional. My trust, the thing I'd built everything around, felt fragile, like glass cracking under weight. For the first time, I questioned not only her honesty but also the foundation of our relationship. Had I been blind this whole time? Had every sacrifice, every late-night shift, every emergency covered, been taken for granted? That night, lying awake on the couch while she slept beside me, I realized the cracks were deeper than I'd imagined. The person I trusted most might not just be careless, they might be deliberately misleading me. And I couldn't shake the creeping fear that this was just the beginning. I never imagined it would come to this. I thought the worst she could do was hide small expenses or stretch the truth about bills. But one Thursday night, everything I believed about us shattered in an instant. I was walking home early from work, planning to surprise her with dinner, when I saw her car parked outside a cafe I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw her laughing, leaning close to another man, touching, intimate, and completely unbothered that anyone could be watching. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and I felt like someone had slammed a door on my entire life. I stepped inside, trying to act normal, heart hammering, and asked casually, "Hey, what are you doing here?" She froze, eyes widening for a fraction of a second, and then plastered on a smile. "Oh, "Just catching up with an old friend," she said, voice a little too casual, too practiced. The way she said it, the way she laughed, it was all wrong. I could see the lie in every twitch of her smile, every sideways glance, every forced laugh. I felt rage and disbelief swirl together, an almost physical pain that left me shaking. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted with every late night, every paycheck, every ounce of emotional energy, betray me like this? My mind raced, every unexplained expense, every late at work excuse, every missed deadline, it all clicked into place. I wasn't just being used. I was being exploited, financially and emotionally, while she built a life with someone else behind my back. I left without saying a word, driving home in silence, the city lights blurring through tears I refused to wipe away. By the time I walked through the door, I realized nothing could go back to the way it was. I couldn't pretend, couldn't ignore it, couldn't act like her words or my sacrifices still mattered. The trust that had defined my relationship was gone, replaced by the cold, raw certainty of betrayal. And yet, even in that moment of heartbreak, a dark thought took root: maybe this was my chance to finally take control, to stop being the victim. But I had no idea how far I'd need to go, and how much it would cost me emotionally, to reclaim my life. The days after I saw them together were the darkest I've ever experienced. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them laughing in that cafe, her hand brushing his, her smile meant for him, not me. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, asking myself over and over, how did I miss all the signs? How did I let this happen? The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was emotional, soul deep, like I had been slowly hollowed out over months of giving everything and receiving lies in return. I confronted her that night, voice shaking, heart pounding, trying to hold on to some shred of reason. "I saw you, with him," I said, barely above a whisper. She didn't deny it. Instead, she shrugged and muttered something about it just happening, as if my world crumbling was her casual afterthought. Her indifference hit harder than the act itself. I felt humiliated, used, and powerless all at once. The person I thought I knew, the person I'd sacrificed so much for, had been building a life without me, and I couldn't stop it. I spiraled. I couldn't focus at work. My friends called, worried, and I lied, saying everything was fine. But inside, I was breaking, bargaining with myself, replaying every memory, every missed cue, every unexplained expense. I wondered if I was naive, if I'd been foolish to trust, to hope, to believe that love could coexist with sacrifice. My confidence, my sense of self, even my dignity felt like they had been stripped away. And yet, amid the despair, a tiny ember of clarity glimmered. I realized that staying in this chaos would destroy me completely. Something had to change, and it had to start with me. But I was trapped at the bottom, staring up at a world I no longer recognized, unsure how I could climb back without shattering completely. For the first time, I understood just how deep betrayal cuts, and how far I would have to go to reclaim myself. After hitting rock bottom, I knew I had to take control before I completely lost myself. I started quietly assessing everything: finances, shared accounts, our lease, her patterns of deceit. I realized I couldn't confront her blindly again. I needed a plan, a way out that protected me emotionally and legally. Late nights were spent organizing documents, tracing expenses, and mapping out exactly what I'd need to reclaim my independence. I made lists: what belonged to me, what I could retrieve, what I had to cut ties with immediately. I also planned emotionally. I journaled, pouring out everything I felt: anger, hurt, disbelief, so that when I faced her, I could remain steady. I rehearsed conversations, anticipating gaslighting, excuses, and manipulations. I pictured myself walking away, calm, collected, and unshaken, leaving the chaos behind. Friends became my sounding board. I didn't reveal everything, but enough that they could offer clarity when my emotions threatened to cloud my judgment. The more I planned, the more I realized how long I'd allowed myself to be used. Every sacrifice, every late night, every future together promise had been leveraged against me. I felt a cold satisfaction building. I wouldn't retaliate with anger, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't plead. I would simply remove myself entirely, cutting ties with precision, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices. And yet, underneath the strategy, a quiet fear lingered. Could I actually go through with it? Could I sever the ties I had invested everything in, even after all the lies? The thought was terrifying, but I also knew that staying would destroy what little peace I had left. By the end of those nights, I made a silent vow: I would walk away, fully intact, stronger than before, and let her regret arrive too late. But even as I imagined it, I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. The confrontation was coming, and I knew it would change everything. The night I confronted her, I remember the air feeling heavy, almost electric, as if the apartment itself knew something was about to break. I walked in, took a deep breath, and locked eyes with her, calm, steady, prepared. I didn't shout, I didn't beg, I didn't cry. I simply stated the facts. I know everything. The money, the lies, the cheating. I saw it. I've traced it. And I'm done. Her face went pale, a flicker of panic crossing her features, replaced quickly by the familiar mask of deflection. What are you talking about? You're overreacting, she said, trying to sound casual, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her. I stayed composed. I've planned my exit. I'm taking my life back, and you don't get to manipulate me anymore. I won't argue, I won't negotiate. I'm leaving, and nothing you say will change it. I could feel her frustration mounting, the energy in the room shifting from shock to anger. She tried to gaslight me, accusing me of paranoia, of mistrusting her, of blowing everything out of proportion. I didn't flinch. Every excuse, every attempt to twist reality bounced off me. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of power. It wasn't about revenge, it was about control over myself, over my life, over my future. I realized she had built her life on my trust and generosity, and now that trust had evaporated. Her panic became palpable. I watched as she fumbled for words, realizing that nothing she did could undo the decisions I had made. And in that moment, I understood that this confrontation wasn't for her, it was for me. My dignity, my self-respect, and my future had been quietly reclaimed. As I packed my essentials into my bag, I could see the realization dawning in her eyes: the person she had used and deceived was no longer available to be hurt. I walked to the door, hand on the handle, feeling the tension pulse one last time, and then, I stepped out into the night, leaving everything behind. The first moments after leaving were surreal. The city lights blurred past the car window as I drove away, heart still hammering, stomach tight with adrenaline and relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a breath of freedom, like a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying had been lifted. I had walked away from someone who had used me, lied to me, and broken every ounce of trust I'd given freely. And yet, the strange thing was, it wasn't bitter, it wasn't rage-fueled revenge, it was clarity. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace that had been impossible to reach while entangled in her deceit. Returning to my own space, alone, quiet, I began reclaiming what had been mine: my bank accounts, my possessions, my routines. I organized, cleaned, and took stock of my life as though I were seeing it for the first time. Every little thing, my books, my favorite coffee mugs, my gym equipment, felt like a small victory. I allowed myself to indulge in small luxuries again, simple pleasures I had abandoned in the service of someone else's happiness. The nights that used to end in worry and exhaustion now ended in a calm silence, the kind that's heavy with relief rather than dread. I also reconnected with friends I had drifted from. Their warmth, concern, and honesty reminded me that I wasn't alone, that the support I needed had always been there if I'd only paid attention. Slowly, I started to rebuild routines, rebuild my confidence, rebuild myself. Each day without her manipulation felt like a brick added to a wall of protection I was finally erecting around my heart. And yet, there was a lingering tension, a faint echo of what had been. I knew she would notice my absence, would eventually feel the void I left behind. I didn't feel glee or malice at the thought, just quiet certainty. I had removed myself from toxicity, and she couldn't touch that anymore. The realization was intoxicating in its simplicity. I was finally free. But freedom, as I would soon learn, carries its own reckoning, and hers was on the horizon, whether she knew it yet or not. It didn't take long before her messages started. At first, they were cautious, almost tentative. "Can we talk?" and, "I think you misunderstood me." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Every word, every attempt at justification, felt like a reminder of the person I had already left behind. Then came the calls, missed ones, followed by voicemails filled with guilt-laden apologies. I never meant for it to get this bad. I messed up, my stomach twisted at the words, not because I felt pity, but because I knew exactly what they meant, regret, finally. I remembered the nights I stayed up, covering bills, answering emergencies, pushing myself to exhaustion to keep us afloat. I remembered her laughter with someone else, her hands on him, and the way she had treated me like I was invisible when I needed her most. Now, all of that effort, the love, the care, the sacrifices, had become irrelevant. She had realized too late that I wasn't someone to manipulate anymore. That realization alone gave me a strange satisfaction, a cold sort of victory. She tried to plead, tried to paint herself as misunderstood, as someone who had made a mistake she was ready to fix. But I had already moved on. My heart no longer had a place for her, no matter how remorseful she sounded. I'd reclaimed my life, rebuilt my boundaries, and the space she once occupied in my mind and my world was gone. I could see her panic subtly creeping into her tone, the way she fumbled for words as if suddenly aware that I wasn't returning. The most potent part of her regret wasn't in her apologies, it was in the silence that followed every unanswered message, the emptiness of realization that she had lost her hold on me forever. For the first time, she faced the consequences of her choices fully, but it was too late. I was no longer available to be hurt, to be used, or to be manipulated. My peace, my independence, my dignity, they were intact, and she couldn't touch any of it. Even as her regret grew, I felt only calm, knowing the chapter had closed, and the story of her betrayal no longer had power over me. In the quiet aftermath, I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened and how I had allowed it to reach such a breaking point. I realized that my generosity, my willingness to sacrifice, had been used as a weapon against me, not as a foundation for mutual love. I had mistaken loyalty for blind devotion and hard work for unquestionable trust. Nights spent replaying every memory, every conversation, every unexplained expense, helped me understand that boundaries weren't just important, they were essential. Without them, even the strongest person can be manipulated into giving until there's nothing left to offer. I started journaling regularly, writing down my thoughts, my emotions, my plans, and my reflections. It was almost like therapy, a way to untangle the chaos she left behind. I asked myself hard questions: where did I ignore my instincts? When did I let my desire to help outweigh my need to protect myself? Each answer brought clarity, and each page helped me reclaim a sense of self that had been buried beneath years of overextending for someone else. I also recognized the subtle signs I had missed, the early red flags that, if acknowledged, might have prevented the worst of it. Random charges, vague explanations, cancellations at the last minute, and constant deflection, they were all small cracks that had foreshadowed the larger betrayal. I learned to trust my instincts, to ask questions, and to hold space for my own needs without feeling guilty. The most important lesson was that love should never come at the cost of self-respect. Sacrifice without reciprocity isn't love, it's exploitation. And while I'll always carry the memories and the sting of betrayal, I now know that my worth is defined by my choices and boundaries, not by how much I give someone else. Even as I rebuilt my life, I felt a quiet empowerment settle in my chest. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger. And although her actions had cut deep, the lessons they left behind made me resilient in ways I hadn't imagined. By the time I fully stepped into my own life again, I realized how much space she had taken up in my head and heart, and how freeing it was to finally reclaim it. I began prioritizing myself in ways I hadn't allowed before, mornings without anxiety, evenings without exhaustion, weekends filled with friends and hobbies I'd neglected. Every small choice felt revolutionary, going to the gym without guilt, cooking a meal just for myself, laughing freely at a joke without checking if she'd be amused. It was as though I was discovering the world again, unfiltered and mine. I also rebuilt relationships with people who truly mattered, those who had been patient and supportive while I was trapped in that toxic cycle. Conversations flowed naturally, friendships deepened, and I found joy in spaces I hadn't realized I'd abandoned. Even the silence between calls or messages from her felt like liberation, a reminder that I didn't have to tolerate manipulation to survive. The lessons of betrayal became lessons of empowerment, shaping the way I approached trust, love, and boundaries. Occasionally, memories would surface, her laughter, the stolen moments, the promises she never kept, but they no longer held power over me. I understood that the emotional weight she had carried in my life wasn't mine to bear anymore. I was free to love, to trust, to live fully, without fear of exploitation or heartbreak. And that freedom, that peace, was more satisfying than any confrontation or revenge could ever be. The most striking moment came when I realized she had truly understood what she lost, but it was too late. Her regret, her apologies, her attempts at reconciliation, all arrived when I had already moved past the pain. I had stepped out of the shadow of betrayal, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. As I look back now, I see the journey clearly, the sacrifices, the lies, the heartbreak, and the rock-bottom moments all led to this, my life reclaimed, my dignity intact, and my future unburdened. I walk forward not just as someone who survived, but as someone empowered, finally free to live entirely for myself.